Hello everyone and welcome back to Final Fantasy IV. And we get attacked right out of the gate. So the fire weapons that the dwarves sell, not all that useful. I probably should have picked up an axe for Cecil, in fact. Oh well, I guess that's for next time I play through this thingamajig. And I forgot to equip the Ice Claw for Yang. This is just going off to the very best of starts. But hey, we learned Virus, which means we can destroy pretty much any encounter that we want to. And as I've already explained why I use Cure 1 for out-of-combat healing, let's move on, once we've equipped the correct gear. Apart from Virus, Yang with the Ice Claw can also destroy almost any encounter we find in this next section of the game. Because Yang is very strong and can attack with pretty much any element we want him to. Yeah, the road to Babil itself is pretty uneventful. And there's really only one way through and around the mountains, nothing secret to find down here yet. And there are the dwarf tanks covering for us. Okay, the Tower of Babil is a fairly large dungeon. In fact, we're not actually going to be traversing the whole thing, we're only traversing part of the tower. Oh yeah, and Rosa can use elemental arrows too. You can equip Rosa with a staff, but there are some instances where it's actually more useful not to. Anyway, these guys, who we fought as a monster in the box in the Tower of Zot, these are now regular random encounters. They are also incredibly weak to ice. They may actually have a 4 times weakness, I don't know exactly. But hey, not that bad. Now, Final Fantasy is no stranger to long dungeons, but the difference between this game and previous Final Fantasy games is that Final Fantasy IV is much, much more generous with save points than earlier FF games. In Final Fantasy I and II, you could only really save at inns, if I remember correctly. And in Final Fantasy III, you had to go through basically 2 whole dungeons without saving in order to finish the game. Which was not rectified in the DS version. They had thought of fixing that, but they did not. Too much fire? Well, Rydia can solve that. Overall, though, the Tower of Babel is actually not nearly as nasty as the Tower of Zot, as you have a lot more black magic firepower to throw around. You have more healing to lean on. And generally a better lineup overall. I like Sid, however, his hammers are supposed to do ×4 damage to machines, but he leaves your party before you really start fighting machines. I think he may have been meant to be in your party for longer. Okay, so all of the monsters in the box in the Tower of Babel are this. Basically, the alert robot counters by summoning a monster. This monster is very easily destroyed by Yang. Which is why I didn't mind, you know, summoning twice. They are also very resistant to magic. But are otherwise not that much of a threat on their own. There's really only one monster type they can summon that's a real danger to you. And that was not it. And I'll be taking that. Now Cain can destroy pretty much any enemy in this tower. Cecil gets a more suitable weapon. And we can move on. Beyond the new prevalence of monsters in boxes, there isn't really all that much interesting in terms of features in the Tower of Babel. It's really just a straight climb to the top. Oh yes, you will also have noticed that Cecil started doing a lot less healing when I equipped the Dwarf Axe, because either the Dwarf Axe decreases his spirit or all of Cecil's swords increase his casting stat. Now that's the dangerous enemy, because Blaze can hurt you for quite a bit. Unless you blow up the monster with Virus, of course. Which we're going to do every time we encounter a Chimera. And now Cecil can wreck everything. Okay, we also got the Cat Claw for Yang, which is the only claw that increases his attack, but it also increases his agility. which is quite important because, again, agility affects the number of attacks you have. It's why the Drain Spear is useless for Kain, basically, because while it does technically have a higher attack power than what Kain is using right now, it reduces his agility by a substantial amount. And hey, a new bow for Rosa! Okay, eggs. If you hit them, but don't hit them hard enough to kill them instantly, they hatch into a more powerful monster, and that's pretty much all they wrote. Another thing that makes these long dungeons easier in this game is the fact that they finally decided on using the MP system. Because Final Fantasy III actually went back to using the D&D style spellcasting system that Final Fantasy I had, and that system is in use even in the 3DS remake of Final Fantasy III. Okay, regular DS remake. I don't want to mess things up. The internet is listening. Yeah, we're not down enough to use cabins yet. That's something for later dungeons. And we'll just save here. Well, we'll just save up there. Rotate the saves. It's very important when doing something like this. It's what saved me from having to start over when doing Dragon Slayer: The Legend of Heroes. Come to think of it, Final Fantasy was fairly late to the game when picking up on voice acting, now that I mention Legend of Heroes. Because they waited until the PlayStation 2 era. Whereas other games started picking up voice acting much earlier, like Shining Force 3, much to its detriment. If you live in the United States, anyway. Now, why did I head back up there? Oh yeah, I thought there was something silly. Never mind. The encounters up here aren't really all that special. I've showed you pretty much everything the tower has to offer, that wise. This isn't like the other RPG I did. And I skipped all these encounters because I ran away from all of them. Yeah, it's not like Final Phantasy Star 4, which is the other turn-based RPG I did. Because monsters don't really have any interesting combination abilities or interactions for the most part in this particular game. Oh hey, a save area. Better remember to actually save. The thing is, there may be that kind of interesting creature interaction in ROM hacks, but I tend not to touch Final Fantasy ROM hacks, or any ROM hacks as a whole. Aha, there's Rubicant, let's get him! But we can't. Instead, we have to deal with this loser. Well, Rydia gave us away. We're gonna have to fight this guy anyway, so... we can take him pretty lightly. Okay, our boss fight, Dr. Lugay and Balnab, known as Barnabas in the Japanese version, because they gotta make the references, they just gotta. Let's see, are either of these yes. Are either of these weak against lightning? Yeah, Dr. Lugay does not seem like the greatest of scientists. Balnab is extremely slow. Dr. Lugay doesn't really do anything to support him. However, it's not weak against ice like pretty much everything else down here is. Yeah, see, Balnab only really got off, like, 2 attacks. Now, just for fun, let's bash Dr. Lugay around a little bit. Oh, whoops, Rydia is too powerful, I didn't mean to do that. And I had to just show off this phase because of the Mazinger Z reference. The disadvantage to showing this off is that Balnab Z hits like a freight train. Also, if you take too long to destroy it, Balnab Z will actually explode and deal a tremendous amount of damage to your entire party. But because Rydia is too powerful, that didn't happen. Okay, the actual Dr. Legay boss fight, not actually all that hard. He does mass poison, which takes forever to act on you. He's not really weak to anything, and his actual damage attack beam tends to miss quite a bit. And the damage done by Beam is dependent on how many hit points he has remaining. So in the end, there's really not much he can do to you. Especially especially if all he does is gas most of the time. See, done already. Yes, Rosa just learned the best combat healing spell in the game. Oh. Well, Wild Goose Chase. Well, you don't need to tell me twice, Kane. But before that... that's the only inconvenience that Dr. Legay's poison is gonna cause us. That boss was a pushover. The rest of the encounters I fought on the way out aren't anything you haven't seen before. Yeah. So, why I don't do Final Fantasy ROM hacks? They have a tendency to just jack up the difficulty sky high for, well, I know why they do it. These are not the hardest games on the Super Nintendo. It's just that they tend to go against the reasons I play games like Final Fantasy IV, which is because Final Fantasy IV, and to a slightly lesser extent Final Fantasy VII, are games I play because they are games I can just sit down and do. I don't have to look up anything. I don't have to check builds all the time. And I think, as I may have said before, that there is some virtue to that sort of thing. Not everything needs to be Dark Souls. Okay, so this is about 0% of a problem. Imps are never strong. Well, there is one that can be, but you have to be very stupid about it if you make things that way. Well, this is a problem. Now, I can believe Yang punching Cecil aside much more than I can believe Tella doing the same thing. Well, Yang blew it all up. And I think we can end things right there. I will be seeing you next time with Final Fantasy IV. Bye!